I guess you're known for things surrounding success, whether it's financial success or success in your property business. And a lot of the stuff you talk about is how to be more successful in many areas. And last night, as I was researching and putting some questions together, I was watching an interview you did with the billionaire gypsy.
Alfie, yeah, he's become my friend as well, thanks to the podcast, yeah.
Very interesting guy, and something he was talking about was success is like a drug. It's good when you're high, but be careful on your way down. And it kind of got me thinking about a lot of these things and these catchphrases that people say, and a lot of there's a lot of I guess influencers and self-help gurus that teach certain things. But I wonder, from your perspective, after all the years and the amazing people that you've spoke to, and there's billionaires and actors and sports people within that, how do you define success, and have you found over that period it's changed at all?
Yeah. How do you define success? That is a really deep question. I think there's a generic answer, and I think there's an individual answer. So generically, I think success is being the most useful version of yourself that you can be to society. Because you can't judge a fish on its ability to play chess. And I think a lot of people in personal development, they're judging others' success on their own. You know, like when a lot of these big business people call other people losers. Well, no, maybe that person's really kind and isn't a loser at all. They're just not an entrepreneur. So success generally, I would say, is how useful are you to as many people as possible, relevant to your own individual uniqueness. But to find your own individual uniqueness, you've got to spend some time asking yourself, who am I and what do I want to do with my life? Because if there's some skills or talents in you that you never allow out because you're too shy or because you don't try them because you stay comfortable, then you will never know how good you could be, but you won't be as useful to many people. Because like, if you look at a podcast, is it successful if the content is amazing and there has no listeners? Or the content's average and it makes people chuckle, but it has 1 billion listeners? Well, you'd probably argue it's somewhere in the middle, I would say. It's got to be good, valuable, but it's got to impact people as well. So I would say that's the generic version. And what a lot of society and personal development does is judge your success based on my values. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you don't judge me on how I look because you know health and fitness isn't as important to me as it is to you, because you've lived your whole life doing it and you've been doing weights and bouncing the doors and teaching it for 30 plus years. Whereas, as you know, with me, I have my cycles of fitness challenges and getting comfortable. So that's the generic definition of success in my view. Specifically for you as an individual, it is, are you doing best at being you? I think that's success. But being you is one of the hardest things in the world, because you've got your wife and your business partner in your ear, and you've got society in your ear, and you've got everyone else judging and projecting onto you, and you start to question who you really are. And there's a lot of noise and media and social media which gets in the way. So this is, when we go for dinner next week, we should talk about this, but I've stopped reading books and I've stopped listening to podcasts. And that's something you and I have always had a thing in common. I always gobble up loads. But one of the reasons is because sometimes if I consume too much content, it starts to lose who I am, because I'm listening to who much of all the authors and everything is. So I will obviously get back into books and podcasts. I love them, but I'm having a little sabbatical where for 6 or 12 months, I've got a couple of big projects on. I'm just gonna not put anything in other than my own voice.
That's interesting.
Because there's so many voices out there. So when you listen to your own voice and you get rid of all judgment and ridicule and fear, who are you and what you're supposed to do with your life? And then you get on that mission of whatever it is. And for me, it's helping as many people on the planet get better financial education and knowledge. Of all the things I love to do, ultimately I like to teach people about making money and have a good relationship with money. And I want to be a voice for society changing the way we view money and not seeing it as bad. And I'm clear about that, and I'm on that mission.
And how, and just to sort of not to lose your track, how did you figure that out? Because that's a problem for a lot of people as well. You know, like you seem to have just found you're obviously an educator. You obviously like making money, and you seem to have been able to. It's not just about making money for you, because you put so much time into creating content and your brand, almost like obsessively, which most people would just not bother to do. So you must have a passion. How do you get those two things right, or was it just by accident?
There's definitely a lot of trial and error, because I see in myself a curse that I have is that I like a lot of things. So at school, I was good at most sports and I was good at most subjects, and that makes you relatively popular at school. But as we start to niche into society, where we go from 8 subjects to 3 at A level and then to 1 at university, that actually really hurt me, because I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I just didn't know. And I used to envy people who wanted to be a firefighter or a chess player, and they knew from a young age, because I just liked too many things, or I liked new things. So I just couldn't find what it or they, because that's an important distinction. Not everyone has got a one it. They might have a they. Because if you think about it now, we're going to live to what? Hopefully 80, 90 years old. Let's assume average 86, let's say. Well, of course, you're going to live till you're 150. But, let's the average, what is it, 86 or something like that, the average life expectancy. So let's say we're going to live till 86. You could have 3 or 4 careers in you from 1821 to 86. So I think a lot of people are like, what is my one thing I don't know? And you never find the one thing because you're looking for the one thing, and that's a paradox. So I kept looking for the one thing, I couldn't find it. And then I started thinking, well, I've got to try some stuff. Let's just try. So I got into property when I was nearly 26 and really enjoyed it, and bought a lot of property and got some good passion out of it. But probably 3 or 4 years into property, I'm like, I don't really like tenants. Nothing against anyone who rents, but I just, I like dealing with tenants on a daily basis, going and collecting rents and dealing with their problems. And I like dealing with inventories and managing agents and insurers and all that. Not for me, it's for someone else. So I started to realise that actually the wider entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur, this seems like, because property is part of entrepreneurship, but I can have more breadth. So then I started exploring, well, actually, if I'm a property owner and I've got a portfolio of properties, does that make me a businessman as well? And one day I woke up and think, I am actually an entrepreneur as well, not just a property investor. So my identity widened, and I really started enjoying entrepreneurship and starting more companies and taking what I'd learned and duplicating and triplicating it. And then, so kind of content and social media and YouTube and podcasts and all that, so I really like that. I love doing that. So it evolved. Property, entrepreneurship, content is the evolution of me over the last sort of 16 years. The good thing about them is they're all similar. Like if I wanted to be a doctor, and then 7 years later I wanted to be a gym instructor, and then 7 years later I want to be someone who makes champagne or whatever, I can't carry those skills over. But property into entrepreneurship into sort of content and social media, you carry the skills over. So I would say it was an element of being lost for 25 years and then trying things and then evolving. But you have to get to the point where you try something, and even if you're not sure. I wrote a book called Start Now, Get Perfect Later, because so many people are looking to be perfect and having all their ducks in a row before they start, and you never start.
So that's your, just pick something and get on with it then.
Well, yes. About halfway through that journey, I started studying John DeMartini. And he talked about passion into profession, turn your passion into your profession. He talked about we all have a unique set of values. And if you have a look inside and ask yourself what's most important to you, and you list those values out, and then you create a meaningful vision linked to those values, you can unearth out of yourself the things that are high on your priorities. And so trial and error, evolution, and study probably got me to the point where I'm really clear now. I can't imagine, I can imagine I'll be doing a lot of things within financial education, but I can't imagine moving outside of financial education. I mean, financial education is one of the biggest industries in the world, so it's not something I'm ever going to conquer and think, oh, I've done that.
But did in relation to that sort of, because I was looking into your book about the
Which one I've written?
Not what is it about? You know, don't wait for it to be perfect.
Start now.
Start now. Yeah.
Get perfect later.
Get perfect later, and it kind of. I know we're dotting around a little bit here, and I'm going to get back to my original question.
They don't know that because they haven't got your question.
But you know. In relation to the book, do you think sometimes it's like, look, you're not going to know, but you're either going to be sitting on your backside doing nothing, or at least move in a direction, and if nothing else, you're going to be in a more forward position than you were, even if you've learned that that's not for you?
Yeah, well, to know what you want to do is also to know what you don't want to do. So if you haven't tried things and cancel off what you don't want to do, how do you know what you want to do? So sometimes, some people are quite lucky. Rory McIlroy from 2 years old was playing golf and probably knew he wanted to be a golfer. But others of us, like me, you have to cross things off the list first. So if someone is listening or watching and they are a procrastinator, or they've wanted to do something for 10 or 15 years and they haven't had the courage, or they're not quite sure, or they're sat on the fence. Sitting on the fence hurts your ass. Get off the fence. You might go the wrong way. Like, if you take a few wrong turns, but you're always moving north, you'll get there in the end. So, yeah, definitely, I've got many flaws, Matt, but one thing I think
we all have.
Yeah, and I've got many of mine are public. But I think one of the things I'm pretty good at is trying stuff. You know, what you did with your podcast was actually a little bit of stroke of genius. I also did it with my TikTok. I also did it with my Rob.team membership site. If you're going to try something new, just commit to doing it for a significant amount of time consistently. Instead of saying, yeah, I'm going to have 1 million listeners, or I'm going to be a podcaster, you just said, I'm going to do podcasting for a year. With my TikTok channel, I just said, I'm just going to do a TikTok video a day. That's all I said. I didn't know, I was quite nervous about doing content at much shorter amount of time and in a much younger demographic. But all my commitment was, I'm going to do a TikTok video every day, and I can handle that. And many of them are probably going to be shit. I was talking to John DeMartini a while back about goals, and he said, goals are a fantasy. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, if you think about a goal, what you do in a goal is you talk about your results, but without any of the challenges. But life has challenges to get to the results. So a goal is essentially the upside desirable fantasy of what you want. When I set goals, I think about all of the problems that will occur on my journey to the outcome. So if I've got a goal to be a millionaire, I'll also go, what security do I need? What people might I lose in my life? You know, who might hate me? How many haters might I have? And he thinks about the downside planning as well as the upside planning.
Interesting.
So some things to think about. Should we
let's do that.
champagne?
Yeah, let's do that.
5 years.
So as you're doing that, my original success question then was what would you say is one of the biggest changes? Like you mentioned that what success means, and you gave a couple of great examples. But before you started podcasting 7 years ago, have you felt that many of the guests and the belief systems that other people have shaped your view? And if so, what would be one of the things that's probably different from before, if anything?
So, what do I believe about success
that may have changed? Like I said, I just simple
Cheers.
thing. Listening to, thank you.
I might have given you a bit less than half because obviously you're not supposed to drink. Sorry, Wendy.
I will build upon that question. I listened to your Andrew Tate interview. He's an interesting character, and cheers, Rob.
Cheers.
5 years.
I'm going to neck this, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, very nice.
Okay,
so he was talking, like, you're obviously the property the property geezer, and you had an interesting conversation about property. He didn't believe necessarily in property. He did and he didn't. But you know, if you listen to the interview, it could be he's got a different belief system about property than maybe you have, for example. And so, have you been able to sort of, as you've gone through a lot of the interviews, have you stayed fairly rigid in your own self-confidence and your beliefs, or have you evolved in? It goes through to what you were saying about almost you going through this cleanse of not reading any books, so you want to get your own feelings. Have you been shaped, and if so, how have you been shaped as it relates to your own personal success?
Yeah, I think there's an evolution, definitely, and because you know, if you think about men. In the 1980s, it was like put you on your double-breasted suit and sell, Wolf of Wall Street. And if you think about men maybe 5 years ago, there's a bit more femininity and vulnerability about being a man. And now, people like Andrew Tate, and not just Andrew Tate, people like Jordan Peterson as well, are bringing in this sort of new, well, actually, you know, embrace your masculinity, because your masculinity is required to fight the wars and put out the fires. And so that's almost like a full cycle of what it is to be a man. And I'll tell you one thing I've changed. I really used to think that being very vulnerable about your struggles and challenges, I really used to think that that was a good thing, because that's what society taught us. And in some areas of my life, that's actually really given me good bonded relationships. But in business, you also have to be tough. And actually, you could have a lot of vulnerabilities and you can't show that to your competitors. You can't show that to your staff. And at times I've been vulnerable because it's the new trend. But actually, it didn't really help me at all. And I should have shown some solidarity and strength. So that's a cycle that you see. So I can imagine successes too, because in the 1980s, it was probably all about being rich and powerful. And now apparently it's all about freedom and choice and travel and minimalism. I mean, I'm not a minimalist person. I never will be a minimalist person. I just think that's like, why would I want less? I want more. and you know, being satisfied with where you're at and what you've got. Well, why would I want to do that? Evolution doesn't want you to be satisfied. Evolution wants you to grow.